Maseches Kesubos Daf Samach Dalid continues the halachos of moed and moedas. That's the situations in which somebody is rebelling against their spouse. The Gemara will have a number of questions and halachos clarifying that sugya. So the Gemara's first subject is that of where a marriage is supposed to happen. You have two people that are supposed to marry each other, but one of them is rebelling. How do you deal with it? The Gemara is going to say there's a difference between why they're supposed to get married, contradicting one of the halachos from a brisa, and 3 attempts to resolve it. So let's discuss what we're referring to. So first of all, there's two possible situations in which marriage is supposed to happen. One is if people are in a risen, they're engaged to get married, and one is if she's a shomeres yavam, that if somebody's falling to yibum to yavam, who she's supposed to do yibum to, that is the brother that died, and she didn't have children, and therefore is falling to yibum to the brother of her husband. So there's a few variables here. First of all, are we talking about an arusa or a shomeres yavam? Second of all, who's doing the merida? Who's refusing? Is it the man or the woman? Third, if we're talking about yibum, what's being refused? Are they refusing to do the yibum, or somebody refusing even to do chalitza, to release from this marriage? Those are the variables that are going to come into play here. So the Gemara begins by a statement of Shmuel. Shmuel compares an arusa to a shomeres yavam, and he says there is Iger is married for an arusa. There is merida. There is a concept of rebellion that we would take action in a situation where you have an arusa and somebody's refusing, but we won't take action in the case of a shomeres yavam. Now the Gemara brings a brisa that says there's no difference between the two. The brisa says we will take action in both of them, so that fits well as far as an arusa where we will take action according to Shmuel. But we have a kasha about shomeres yavam where Shmuel says we don't take action, and the brisa says that we do take action. So we need three ways to resolve this contradiction between the brisa and Shmuel, and they're all going to have to make sense. Whichever way we'll want to resolve it will have to make sense as far as the halacha of an arusa. So the Gemara's first attempt is to say that we're not talking about the same situation. The brisa is talking about where she's rebelling and he's coming with a taina, and the brisa therefore says we will take action against her to force her. But Shmuel's talking about where he is rebelling, he doesn't want to do the yibum, and she's coming with a taina. So there we have to change the language a little. Shmuel's words were close when he is married al arusa, al shomeres yavam. We'll have to change that from on an arusa and on a shomeres yavam to li arusa and li shomeres yavam, for the arusa and for the shomeres yavam, to have the men be forced over here to agree. Now, what would be the reason, according to Shmuel, that there would be a difference between a shomeres yavam and an arusa? First of all, before that even, why would we not force him? Why would he force her? So the answer is because he has an obligation of pru revu. So if he's being denied pru revu, we would take action to help him. She doesn't have an obligation of pru revu. If he's denying her the mitzvah of pru revu, she doesn't have the mitzvah, so there's no reason we need to help her continue, let her go do something else. So the Gemara says, according to Shmuel, why should there be a difference between an arusa and a shomeres yavam? Why would we take action to force an arusa to go through with it and not to force a shomeres yavam to go through? Why would we penalize the arusa and not the shomeres yavam? So the Gemara says, maybe you'll say that one is not mitzvah and pru revu. It's not true. They're both not commanded in pru revu. So if you're not going to take action for shomeres yavam, you shouldn't take action for an arusa either. So the Gemara says maybe she's not commanded in pru revu. Maybe she wants a child. She needs somebody to help her in her old age or to do the burial, whatever it is. The Gemara says the same thing should be true then. Again, there shouldn't be a difference between the halachos as to an arusa and a shomeres yavam. Therefore, the Gemara moves on from this pshat. The Gemara says we're not talking about, Shmuel was not talking about where she needs action because the husband's refusing. Shmuel is also talking about where he needs action because she's refusing. So Shmuel and the brisa are both talking about where he's refusing. Why then is there a contradiction between Shmuel and the brisa? Why does Shmuel say for a shomeres yavam we won't do anything, but for a but the brisa says we will? So the answer is that Shmuel is talking about where he wants to do yibum and she's refusing, and the brisa is talking about where he wants to do chalitza and she's refusing. And we will take action to make a chalitza happen. We won't take action to make a yibum happen. The Gemara says, why not? Why do we have to take action for the chalitza? The reason must be because he can't marry somebody else as long as he's stuck to this woman. As long as he has a zika, nobody wants to marry him. So the Gemara says the same thing should be true if she refuses to do yibum. What's the difference if she refuses to do yibum or refuses to do chalitza? Either way, the same halacha should be. Why should Shmuel be different than the brisa? So the Gemara therefore says it must be The third answer is that there's a machlokes here whether we are in Mishnah Rishona or Mishnah Achona. That is, in the old days, the halacha was that it was preferable to do yibum because that was the mitzvah of the Torah. Chalitza was if you were refusing, it's not something you're supposed to do. However, then things changed because people were not mechavin l'shem and mitzvah; they were a little bit mechavin l'shem hana, and it was a shtickle problem. So we stopped advising people to do yibum. We said better off doing chalitza. So therefore, it'll be different halachos in the Mishnah Rishona and in the Mishnah Acharona. The answer therefore works out as follows. Shmuel and the Brisa are both talking about where they are demanding yibum. He's demanding yibum. But the Brisa says we should take action because there in Mishnah Rishona where yibum is preferable. Shmuel is talking about Mishnah Acharona where chalitza is preferable and therefore we don't take action. Next, the Gemara wants to discuss the amounts that are added to or subtracted from the ksuba as part of ways of dealing with a rebellious husband or wife. So as before that, the Gemara discusses what is the tarpikin. We see that according to Yehuda, the shir was a tarpik. So what is that? So the Gemara defines a tarpik as an astira, which is a half zuz. So it's half as much as the zuzin of the other opinion. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says so explicitly 3 tarpikin, which is 9 ma, comes out to a ma and a half per day for the 6 days of the week. This is the amount that is given for the man. Given from the man, that is, meaning this is the amount that is added on to the ksuba. If the man is the mored, that is 1/2 zuz, and a half, that's a zuz and a half per day for the 6 days of the week. So the Gemara asks, when she's mored, she loses 7 for the week, 7 dinar, more tarpikin, whatever it is. He only has to pay an extra 1 for the weekdays. She pays for Shabbos, he doesn't pay for Shabbos. What's the reason? Gemara says the reason is very simple. She's losing, where she's just having subtracted from her ksuba. So if you subtract something for Shabbos, there's no schar. No one's being paid anything for Shabbos. On the other hand, where she is being paid for every Shabbos that goes by, if she would be paid for the Shabbos day itself, it looks like schar Shabbos. It looks like she's making money for Shabbos. You're not allowed to make money for Shabbos. Therefore, since for her it's being added on, not subtracted, therefore it's got to be an amount which is only for the 6 days of the week and not for Shabbos itself. Now the Gemara asks, what is the reason that her amount is lower? Why does she have to pay more than she receives? If she is the moredes, she has to pay a full dinar per day. Well, he only has to lose less, and the reason is because the pain of her withholding tashmish from him is obviously greater than the pain of him withholding tashmish from her. You can see that from the fact that in the Zona market, he's the one who pays for services of a Zona, not the other way around. Therefore, it's obviously more painful for him. He is willing to spend money on it. Also, he has his aver externally, and therefore it's visible on him when he's in pain and it's embarrassing, while she does not have external visible signs when she needs the tashmish that he's withholding from her. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses the details of the 8 types of supplies that a husband must give his wife as part of the obligation to give him his zonos. Mishnah will also talk about the work that she must do minimally to provide to give her husband in exchange for that. So the 8 types of food and necessary supplies are as follows. First of all, he has to give grain, and that could either be 2 kav of wheat or 4 kav of seorin, 4 kav of barley. So Rabbi Yossi says that we're talking about in the place of Rabbi Shmuel, which is near Edom, and over there the seorim, the barley takes twice as much to create bread as the wheat does. That's why it's 4 kav to 2 kav. Next thing he has to give her is half a kav of beans. Then he has to give her oil, that's half a loig. This is all per week. Then he has to give fruit. So he has to give a kav of figs or a portion, a mana of pressed figs, or some other fruit that is equal in value and size if he doesn't have those fruits. Next he has to give her a bed. So he has to provide 3 things: a bed, a soft mat, and a hard mat that's used as part of the sleeping arrangements. Now, as far as clothing, so he has to give her fixed items. He has to give her a new tichel, hair covering, every year. He has to give her something to wear around her waist every year, and shoes, she gets new ones every Yom Tov. Now, other clothing, she gets 50 zuz worth of clothing each year, and he has to give it to her in the winter so that when they're thick, she can use them for warmth, and then she wears them when they're worn thin and they're not hot during the summer. Now, he gives her new ones each year, and she keeps the old ones. The Gemara will explain what she could do with the old ones. Now, the eighth category of things is just he has to give her a silver ma'ah, a ma'ah kesef, for whatever expenses she needs on her own. That's her allowance for the week. And she also eats the suda with him on Friday night. Now, the Gemara is going to bring later the opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that she eats the entire Shabbos. Now, this is all for the poorest person in Yisrael. Somebody who has more and could afford more, is on a higher level, has to provide more commensurate with their social status. Now, what does she have to do? So she has to work a minimum amount of work, and the earnings go to him. And there's two ways to define that minimum amount. Either we could be talking about string that she spins for the chassis, for the warp. That's the back and forth string in a weave. Or it could be string that she weaves for the Erev, for the weft. So if it's warp, if it's the chassis, so that's harder to make, and therefore it's a lesser amount. In Yehuda, it's 5 slime, which is equal to 10 slime in the Kalil, where the measures are lighter. Now, if it's going to be the Erev, so then in Yehuda, it has to be 10 slime, which is 20 slime in the Kalil. We now begin the Gemara, and the Gemara analyzes the amount of food that we're prescribing for a full week. The Gemara wants to know how we came up with these numbers, and which opinion, as far as how much a person eats in a Suda, does this fit with. We're going to show that there's a machlokes between several Tanaim, how much a person eats in a general Suda, and this Mishnah doesn't seem to fit with any. The Mishnah had said 2 kav of wheat for a week. A week is 14 meals. There are 7 days in the weekend. In the days of Chazal, people ate 2 meals a day, so you need 14 meals. So 2 kav for 14 meals indicates a 1/7 of kav per meal. So the Gemara is going to show that that calculation doesn't add up. I'm going to quote a lengthy brisa which discusses 3 different halachos where we need to know the size of food. Halacha number 1 is for an erev tchumen. Erev tchumen works by people having enough food as to provide for 2 meals being put into a place for everyone together. Everyone needs to own a piece of it. And the size has to be is enough for 2 meals for each person that participates in the Erev. So first of all, we have to know how much are 2 meals for that. Next, we'll have the halacha of somebody who stays in a house that has teras. If he stays there long enough to eat a suda, there he becomes tameh, and he's metameh the begadim that he's wearing. Then we need to know the minimum size to contract tumas haguf, tumah of the body, from eating tameh food. And then there is the minimum size of food to be mekabel tumah tumas ochel. So the Bryce is going to discuss all these things. There's a number of opinions here. So first of all, how much are sudos for 2 sudos? How much are 2 sudos to be able to set aside for an erev tchumen? So Gemara brings 4 opinions. Rabbi Meir says that it's the standard amount that a person eats on his weekday meals, 2 weekday meals. He doesn't give a number, he just gives the standard size that he eats for his weekday meals. Rabbi Yehuda says it's 2 Shabbos meals. And this is talking about the bread that goes with the meals. Now, both of them are lenient. Rabbi Meir would eat less food he would eat less bread during the weekday because he added bread with all the special Shabbos foods. Rabbi Yehuda would eat less bread on Shabbos because he had so many other special Shabbos delicacies, less bread was eaten. But either way, they didn't give a set amount. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rav Shimon do give a set amount. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says it's the loaf of bread, which can be purchased with a pundion, at the time that the price of bread is a dinar per sela, a dinar per sa of bread. The way it's expressed is 4 sain are sold for a sela. A sela is 4 dinarim, so it's a sa per dino. And it's that rate, the amount that you can buy for 1 pundion, that is the minimum amount here. And the Rashi explains there are 48 pundionim in a selah. Now, that's Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka's opinion. Rabbi Shimon says it's 2/3 of a loaf of bread as long as there are 3 loaves of bread in a kav. So it's 2/9 of a kav. Now, let's just talk briefly about the rest of the brisa. The brisa says, what is the minimum size for the time that one has to stay in a house with tzaras in order to be mekabel tumah? It's the time that it takes to eat a certain size of bread. That size is half of what we said before. It's half a kikar. However, we define kikar based on what we said earlier. Now, why is it a lesser amount? Because it's a chumrah, that it's less time, and there's a special kula that's made for an erev tchumen. Now, how much do you have to eat to be metame tumas aguf? If somebody eats kikar of tameh bread, he becomes tameh, and he's not allowed to eat truma afterwards. So that's half the amount for a house with tzaras. So it's a quarter of the amount for an erev chatzeres. It's a quarter of a loaf of bread, which the Gemara says is the size of 2 eggs, because a kav has 24 eggs, and that is, there are 3 loaves of bread in a kav, and therefore it's 8 eggs per kav. A quarter of that is 2 eggs, which is the quarter of a kav of a loaf, which is the minimum size amount here. Now, for a tumas ochlin, it is 1/8 of that. It's half of that amount, and it's 1 egg, which is 1/8 of a loaf of bread, as we were describing before. Anyway, these are all the opinions. So the kasha is that none of this fits with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said that the amount is 2 kav for 14 meals, 1/7 of a kav per meal. Says the Gemara, if you do the math, how much does 2 kav, how many sudas does 2 kav provide according to each opinion? So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, 2 kavin of flour of wheat provides 8 meals. And according to Rabbi Shimon, it provides 18 meals. Remember, Rabbi Shimon said it's 2/9 per meal. So you have 2 kav. It's going to be 18 meals. So the Gemara says, therefore, it doesn't fit, because we're supposed to be providing 14 meals for a week, not 8 and not 18. So which opinion is that of our Mishnah? The Gemara tries a number of approaches to answer this. The Gemara's first approach is that really it's Rav Yochanan ben Broka. Now, Rav Yochanan ben Broka, we had calculated that according to him, 2 kav of our Mishnah should add up to 8 sudas, not 14. And the reason is because the way he set up the math, it comes out that there are 2 sudas to a half kav. 2 sudas of the erev tchumen per each half kav. That would mean that the 2 kavin of the Mishnah, which is 4 times as much, would be 8 sudas. First says, no, you're making a mistake. The 2 sudas is what you get from a half kav after you subtract the suda that the chenveni, that the person who sells the flour, keeps for himself. He takes 1/3 profit. Really, a half kav provides 3 sudas, but the seller keeps 1 profit, and if you only walk off with 2. That's why when he said the amount that you sell for, he was talking about what's left over after you deduct what the guy keeps for himself. But really, there are 3 sudas per half kav. If that's so, then the 2 kav in our Mishnah comes to much more. So the Gemara says, first of all, it's still off. If the 3 sudas to a half kav means that 2 kavin, 4 times as much, comes to 12 sudas. We have to get to 14. So the Gemara says, okay, so she eats with him Friday night. We said the Mishnah eats with him on Friday night. The Gemara says 2 problems on that. First of all, it's still only 13, still missing 1. Second of all, according to one opinion, eating with him Friday night refers to tashmish, it doesn't refer to a suda. So you're still left without 14 sudas according to this explanation. Says Gemara, okay, you have to say that the storekeeper doesn't take 1/3 for his profit, he takes half for his profit. And therefore, when Rav Yochanan ben Broka said you get 2 meals out of a half kav, there's really 4 meals in a half kav, but you only walk away with 2 after the storekeeper takes his profit. Now, before the Gemara gets into that, the math still doesn't add up. The Gemara first says, what do you mean? Does he take 1/3 profit? Does he take a half profit? And the Gemara says it depends if you're giving him wood to bake for you or not. If you want him to bake for you, so you buy the flour and you give it to him and you give him the wood, then he takes profit of only 1/3. If you make him use his own wood, then he takes profit of a half. Now, over here, the Gemara still asks, you still end up with 16. If you have 4 meals per half kav, then 2 kav is going to be 16 meals. So how are we going to make this fit? So the Gemara offers two answers. The Gemara says, first of all, we might be in the opinion of Rabbi Chidka, that says that one is supposed to eat 4 meals on Shabbos. Comes out throughout a week, then you end up having 16 meals. You have 6 days of the week, 2 meals a day is 12 meals, plus another 4 for Shabbos. She needs to have 16 meals, and that's why he gives this amount. The Gemara says it could also be the Chachamim will say that there are only 3 meals on a Shabbos, and therefore he only really needs to give her 5 meals. 15 meals, that's it for the week. But he gives her 1 extra for visitors, for guests and people who pass by. That's why she gets an extra meal each week, and that's why it's 2 kav. Says once you say that, you could also fit this in with Rabbi Shimon. According to him, the cheshbon came out to 18 sudas. You could say that according to Rabbi Chidka, she needs for herself 16, and there are 2 extra for the people who are guests and passers-by. According to Chachamim, she only needs 15 for herself, and there are 3 extra for guests and people who pass by. Now, the Gemara here has one more line, which we explained as part of the Mishnah. The Gemara said that when we said that there's twice as much grayness if he's giving her the barley than if he's giving her the wheat. So the Gemara says that is according to Rabbi Shmuel, who lived near Edom. The barley in Edom was very bad, and therefore took twice as much barley to make the same amount in equivalence to wheat.